And welcome back. This hour, we have focused on two major issues: the continued pro-Palestinian protests roiling college campuses around the country and the fallout from sweeping abortion bans around this nation. So let's bring in someone who sits at the center of both of those issues. Joining me now is Florida Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Congresswoman, thank you so much for making time for us today. I want to start with your state's 6-week abortion ban that went into effect today. What are you hearing from your constituents right now? And as an elected leader, what are you going to do to combat this law and its implementation?
Aaron, I'm hearing agony from women across the state who are now going to be suffering over the next 6 months, hopefully not much longer than that, because we have a constitutional amendment on the ballot that will allow Floridians to enshrine abortion rights in our state constitution, that over 1 million Floridians signed a petition to put on the ballot. But I'm hearing the kind of agony that comes from when the government, when a politician, when a judge inserts themselves in between a woman and her family and their doctor on deeply personal health care decisions. And for the next six months, at least, in Florida, we have a near total abortion ban, regardless of the circumstances. I mean, in only the most extreme situations, like the like the absolute certain death of the mother if an abortion doesn't take place. And essentially that ends the opportunity for a woman to have access to this deeply personal health care really anywhere in the Southeast. And it is the MAGA extremists led by Donald Trump that perpetrated this horrific decision on us.
Well, you've touched on a few things that I want to ask you about here, particularly this ballot issue, ballot measure that's going to be voted on in November. Essentially, it would allow the standard laid out in Roe to stay in effect there in Florida. What's the pitch that you make to Floridians today as you talk to people about supporting that measure?
Well, the overwhelming majority of Floridians support a woman's right to make her own deeply personal health care decisions along with her family in conjunction with her health care provider. And what the amendment would do in our Constitution, it would ensure that we embed that right in the state constitution up to the point of viability. We had that right as part of our right to privacy in our state constitution for 35 years. Ron DeSantis' state Supreme Court overturned a 35-year right as a result of Donald Trump bragging that he put a Supreme Court in place that overturned Roe. And so it has been part of the DNA of the MAGA extremist Republican Party to take away the most deeply personal rights of women. And this is playing out all over the country. And starting today, we're in the most extreme situation with a near total ban before most women even know they're pregnant, Aaron. I can tell you that as a mom of 3 kids, for my 3rd child, my youngest daughter, I didn't know I was pregnant with her until I was 8 weeks pregnant, and God forbid anything went wrong. In Florida, under the law now, an abortion would not have been an option for me. It's outrageous.
You know, Democrats like yourself are hoping that the abortion referendum is going to get Floridians to vote for your candidates as well, not just for this ballot measure. How confident, how sure are you that voters are going to hit yes and then also support Democratic names on the ballot when they go to vote in November? Should Democrats be running hand in hand with this referendum issue this year?
Well, if you look at the more than 1 million signatures that we got, it was nearly 1.5 million signatures that got the constitutional amendment on the ballot. We only needed about 890,000, and 20% of those signatures were from Republicans. So this is not a partisan issue, and I think that voters in Florida, understanding that Roe is gone and that we have a president, we have a former president running for office again who refuses to say whether or not he would sign a national abortion ban in place if he became president again. I'm certain that means that he will. Who actually the other day said that women deserve to be prosecuted and deserve to be essentially hunted by police in the event that they have an abortion. So their rights are not safe, and they'll be voting for, I think families across Florida will vote for pro-reproductive freedom candidates, and that will result in Democrats getting elected because Republicans are an anti-choice, extremist, anti-reproductive freedom party.
I do want to change gears in the minute I have left here. Protests are continuing at college campuses around this country. We saw hundreds of arrests last night at Columbia University in New York. We know now that President Biden will deliver a speech on anti-Semitism next week. What would you like to hear from the president?
Well, today is the first day of Jewish American Heritage Month, a month in which in the United States we commemorate and educate and raise awareness about the important contributions that Jews have made to our rich history in the United States. I'm glad to hear that President Biden is going to be making that important speech on anti-Semitism, and particularly on our college campuses. You certainly have a First Amendment right to peacefully express your opinion, but that right ends when you start to infringe on the rights to others' safety, when you jeopardize the safety or cause interference with students who have the right to go to class and the right to be able to participate in things like graduations. So the lawlessness that has occurred on these campuses has not been peaceful protest, and in fact has called for things like intifada, which is the violent overthrow of a Jewish and democratic state. That's what Hamas and Hezbollah are committed to, and that's unfortunately what many of these students and their outside agitator supporters have been advocating. That's not peaceful First Amendment protected speech.
Congresswoman, we've heard from progressives who say they will not support President Biden. They may not support him in November because of his Israel-Hamas policy. You are a supporter of President Biden. Obviously, you've called for a temporary ceasefire. Is there a way to get voters to show up in November if they feel this strongly about the president's policy, or are they lost?
Let me just be clear. I didn't call for a temporary ceasefire. What I called for and have consistently called for is that Hamas needs to accept the deal that has been offered and negotiated by Qatar and Egypt, Israel and the United States to release the remaining 133 hostages, and a pause in the fighting would occur in conjunction with that. That needs to happen, and that there would be prisoners that are Palestinian prisoners that are being held that would be released as well. So I just want to make sure what my position is and that that's clear. We have an election coming up that I think will hinge around the most important issues right now, whether voters want to elect a president like Donald Trump was, that was extremist and chaotic, and whose among his first actions was to enact a Muslim ban and prevent people just because of their faith from being able to travel to this country, immigrate to this country, adopt anti-LGBTQ plus policies, who has supported banning books, banning speech, infringed and is proud of the anti-Roe Supreme Court that he installed. And so it's a pretty clear contrast. Yeah. We have Joe Biden, who supports reproductive freedom, who supports making sure that we have a diverse, rich tapestry of Americans that are welcoming to immigrants, and the contrast couldn't be more clear. That's what I think that is going to drive the overwhelming majority of voters' decisions when they go to the polls, and I think they'll choose to re-elect Joe Biden as a result, because that contrast is so clear.
Okay. Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. My pleasure.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or follow us on social media.